Hi, this is the UKYCC delegation. We're sat here blogging, tweeting, updating live from the conference centre where the UN climate negotiations are happening right now. So we've got some questions from around the UK and around the world for people that are interested in following us at the moment. First one comes from Karen from Newcastle, and she says, "Hi, what do you think medical students can do on a political level to campaign on the issue of climate change?"
I think one of the things that's really important for medical students to do is understand that they have a position of trust within society and that when they speak, people listen. So they should be talking about this with not necessarily the patients that they treat on a day-to-day basis, but with their colleagues, with their friends, with their families, with acquaintances, and also communicating it to higher political levels as well.
Cool, thank you, Neva. Dat from Canada is asking, how important has Canada's role been in Durban?
I think it's probably fair to say they've had an important role, but a very negative one. We work with youth delegations from around the world, and the Canadian youth have been really active in responding to a lot of the things that the Canadian government, the Canadian negotiators have been talking about. So for instance, the tar sands became a really big issue, which is a very destructive way to get oil, and the Canadians responded to that very angrily. There's been a few policies from the Canadian government which have been met with real outrage from the youth in general, or civil society in general. There's been a general perception that Canada have been blocking a lot or slowing things down. They did say that it was time countries played hardball with the developing world and we shouldn't be guilted into giving them any money. You know, so things like that they've been important, but for very bad reasons. So yeah, I think it's fair to say Canada have been one of the worst groups of negotiators here, I'm afraid to say. But the positive of that is it's been met with absolute anger and a lot of positive action from the youth. So yeah, I think that sums up Canada's role in Durban.
What's most likely to happen to the Kyoto Protocol?
We don't know. Just now we're sitting here actually on the last day, or the Friday of discussions, so it should be finishing today but might get extended tomorrow. Kyoto obviously runs out next year. It's so important to have some legally binding framework, and if not Kyoto then something else. But we don't know just now. No one really seems to know what's going to happen to Kyoto, and that's probably what's created so much tension here. We're just finished coming from a huge protest which we've never seen in the UN before, and it's just pure sort of frustration and anger and a lot of energy from people because of this uncertainty about Kyoto. So, sorry, we don't know, not yet.
Any promising initiatives from big players?
Earlier in the week there was a suggestion that China was going to be more flexible and perhaps move towards entering a universal treaty. That seems to have gone quiet in the last couple of weeks. The EU seems to have been stepping up its game to build an alliance with the LDCs, which are the less developed countries, and the small islands, developing countries, and the alliance of small island states. Too many islands in there. But I think that they could take a stronger role and reach out to other places where we have historical connections and really talk to Canada and talk to India and talk to Australia and use our influence there as Commonwealth countries.
Cool. I have a question from someone called Sarah from Reading, and she's asking, two of the UKYCC delegates, Helen and Christina, got debadged today, which means that they got chucked out of the conference centre. So Barry, I was wondering, what do you think was going through their heads when they were protesting today? And why do you think they allowed themselves to be debadged?
We've been here in a very concentrated, intense environment this last 2 weeks as the talks were going on. We've all came here, raised money, put a lot of effort into getting here. We really care about the issues on the table. Different people feel differently about all the different things and want to act in different ways. And I think it's a really important thing that they've done to be part of a unit of people, get media exposure, let their voice be heard, and getting debadged is something that is a good thing. It's good to be involved and to get your voices heard and get out there and be part of the movement. And we have the capacity within the group to do that and be in here and be involved with a couple of hours to go.
Dan from London is asking, what are the positive and negative implications of civil disobedience at COP17, especially in light of Occupy movements from around the world?
Well, civil disobedience, I guess there's a big spectrum of the amount of disobedience you can have. We had a protest here in the UN, as mentioned, and it got a lot of attention. The chair of the SBI, which is one of the sort of groups that have a big discussion at the UN, noticed it, came out to ask what was going on. Negotiators were involved, so it created a real sort of buzz about the place, and hopefully it's going to set the tone. But then other sort of civil disobedience, if people want to look at it that way, could be a bit more destructive. If it was being more radical or more sort of causing damage to anything, would have a negative impact. The next COP is going to be in Qatar, so it's really important we have civil society participation there. So there's a sort of line between not damaging what we can do in the future but getting our message heard. I think the point is to do actions or to make your voice heard in a meaningful way and not to do it to cause disobedience. If that was the question.
I think on that as well, what we're generally seeing is a swell of public emotion globally, where people are really starting to get it. It's really happening, and that here is happening as well, in both in the conference centre and outside the conference centre, and it's very powerful, and that sort of links into what happened today with Helen and Christina as well. It's really important, and I think here, it being an African COP, is one of the things I'm going to take away from it, is that we've heard their voices. It's really, really strong, it's really, really real, and you can see everyone mobilising to make a change and express their opinions and voices.
Neva, I was wondering if you can generally explain the feelings of the delegation and plans for the rest of the day.
I think in general we're all pretty tired. Like, it's been a really long 2 weeks, and I know that I feel pretty drained. Also with the knowledge that it's maybe not another 12 hours but another 36 hours that we're going to be here trying to follow this process and influence it where we can. Some of the delegates, our delegation, are now outside, having been debadged, and probably having a lot more fun in a lot more creative environment in the civil society space. But mainly people seem to be holding up really well, and what would be really good is to keep on hearing from folks back in the UK, so that we know we're not talking into a vacuum, which it doesn't feel like we are at all. It feels like we're part of a global movement that really care about this and want to see change.
Simon from Hong Kong says, no matter what the outcome is today, what are the top 3 things you think that young people have achieved at COP17?
I think we've achieved a lot. Maybe we can give one each. I'd say that, like, as an international youth movement, it's almost been like the straw that's starting to break the camel's back, just seeing this in action, and it's just an outrage that these people are talking supposedly on our behalf when there's so many of us who disagree with what they're saying. So we're getting angry and pissed off at, like, what's going on, but in a constructive way. We're not just shouting on the sidelines, we're thinking about how to move forward, and as a global movement, what we can do to influence these things. And Barry was saying we're on the verge of something hopefully happening. It's happening all around the world. People are getting angry about individuals or companies taking decisions that are for the people. So I think there's a massive awareness for that, and it's growing within the international youth climate movement. So I take that as a positive, regardless of what happens to Kyoto Protocol, regardless of what happens in the next couple of days.
Larry?
I think as well, we've learned from each other. That's something I've already said. It's like we've learned and we've heard the voices of the global south. That's something we've took from it. And then from this as well, we've also got a legacy and a network of young people that know each other, communicate through social media, communicate through all the channels that's going. It's very empowering, very uplifting, and that's something I'm going to take from it that's very positive. And I think when you have that, that cultivates a can-do attitude, and I think that's something that's very important that's going to come away from this.
Neva?
I'm really sorry, but what was the question?
Simon from Hong Kong is asking, what are the top 3 things young people have achieved at COP17 regardless of the outcome? So just one thing from you.
Just one thing?
Yeah.
I think learning not to be afraid of the political process and learning not to be afraid to speak to decision makers and tell them honestly what's the right thing to do and what's the moral and the just thing, as well as the thing that we need to make our future safe. And for me that's a massive achievement.
Last question's from Guppy from London, and she's asking, what does hope look like?
Well, we could go back like a couple of weeks, it seems like months ago, but 2 weeks ago we had the Conference of Youth, and I had all the sort of countries there saying, hey, like, we're all from around the world and we're really excited to be here. And then there was the African youth, mainly from Kenya, that travelled in caravan, and had so much hope when they entered the room and just so much noise and energy, looking forward to the negotiations, but just looking forward in general, they had so much hope. So for me, hope is like a lot of Kenyans with vuvuzelas screaming and dancing and getting everyone else in the room motivated. That's my visualisation of hope, looking back and forward.
Cool. So if anyone else has any questions, just comment on this video on Facebook or on our blog, and I'm sure if we don't find someone in UKYCC to answer it, we'll find someone around, maybe a negotiator or maybe another youth. What do you want?
There's always going to be somebody from UKYCC to answer it.
Yeah, neighbours camping out. Bye!